Welcome to True Crime Threads, where real stories unravel thread by thread. In today's case, a grandfather's hidden obsession shatters the illusion of a perfect family. In the quiet suburb of Maple Ridge, the Harrisons appeared to be an ideal family. James Harrison, a retired school principal, was the pillar of the community, respected, educated, and always willing to help. After his wife's passing, he moved into the guest house of his son's home to stay close to his family, especially his only granddaughter, Lily. His son Michael and daughter-in-law, Claire, had offered the arrangement so he wouldn't feel isolated after years of solitude, and James accepted with quiet gratitude. Lily was 12, bright, artistic, and adored by her parents. Her world was filled with watercolor paints, sketchbooks, piano melodies, and bedtime stories. She had a way of lighting up the room with her curious questions and infectious laughter. To James, she was more than just a granddaughter. She was a second chance at joy. He began spending more and more time with her, offering to walk her to school, sitting with her during evening homework, and attending every school event she participated in. He built her a custom art studio in the backyard, using his own savings and tools, insisting she needed a creative space. The studio had floor-to-ceiling windows, perfect lighting, and even a small heater to keep it warm in winter. Lily loved the space and often spent hours there after school, drawing animals, nature scenes, and dream-like landscapes. James would bring her snacks and silently watch as she worked. To outsiders, their bond was heartwarming. Neighbors praised James for his devotion. At community events, he proudly spoke about Lily's talents. Claire often remarked how lucky they were to have him so involved, and Michael appreciated the emotional support James provided. Their family dinners were always full of warmth, laughter, and shared stories, and no one suspected anything unusual. But as weeks turned to months, James's involvement in Lily's life began to deepen in subtle ways. He started organizing her routine, suggesting when she should practice piano or when she should eat. He maintained a log of her favorite things, from the food she liked to the books she read. He even rearranged parts of the guest house to store her childhood items: old shoes, crumbled drawings, and outgrown clothes. He took frequent photos of her, claiming he was compiling a scrapbook. Sometimes he would ask her to pose. Other times he snapped pictures when she wasn't looking. When asked, he brushed it off as innocent admiration. Everyone believed him. After all, he had been a school principal for over 30 years, someone used to working with children. Who would question his intentions? James began limiting his interactions with the outside world. He refused travel invitations, missed old friends' birthdays, and instead filled his time with tasks centered around Lily, from learning about the kinds of pencils she liked to researching child prodigies. His days were devoted to understanding her every interest. While Lily appreciated the attention at first, she began to sense something was different. She wasn't sure what it was. Her parents still trusted James completely, believing his interest came from love and pride. But beneath the surface, something quiet had begun to shift. A boundary had been crossed unnoticed, unspoken, and slowly growing in the shadows of what once looked like the perfect family. Over time, the once healthy relationship between grandfather and granddaughter took a strange turn. James began collecting Lily's drawings and locking them in his room. At first, he claimed it was to preserve her art, to protect her talent from being lost or damaged. Claire thought it was a sweet gesture, even thoughtful. But when Lily asked for one of her older drawings back, James told her he couldn't remember where it was. That same day, he was seen carefully filing papers in a locked cabinet in his room. He also started recording Lily's piano practices. He told the family he was saving them to show her one day how much she had improved. But the recordings were excessive. Every session, even the smallest improvisations, were archived. James kept a detailed journal of each entry, noting the date, time, and even Lily's mood. No one knew about the journal but his son, not Claire, and certainly not Lily. Lily's toys, especially those she had outgrown, began disappearing from donation piles. James would quietly retrieve them and store them in boxes, labeled and sealed. He said they were keepsakes, but these items were not sentimental. Some were broken, some were barely used. He stored them with obsessive care, wrapping them in tissue paper, organizing them by category, and locking them away. Claire and Michael began to notice James spending long hours in his guest house, even when Lily wasn't around. When asked, he would say he was organizing old paperwork or reading. His tone remained calm, his smile unchanged, and his explanations always made sense in the surface. To the family, it seemed like harmless behavior from a lonely man who had found joy in being close to his granddaughter. There was no reason to question it. But then came an incident that couldn't be ignored. Lily approached her mother late one evening and, in a quiet voice, said she didn't like when Grandpa stared at her while she was drawing. She said he stood too close, didn't say anything, just watched. Sometimes, he followed her around the house when no one else was home. She didn't understand why, but it made her uneasy. Claire was concerned, but not alarmed. She reassured Lily that James was just protective and probably didn't realize he was making her uncomfortable. She promised to talk to him, but the conversation never happened. There was always a distraction, another task, another excuse. Besides, it didn't seem serious at the time. That same week, Lily's teacher called home. She mentioned that Lily had been more withdrawn in class, less talkative, less expressive in her drawings. Her themes had shifted from colorful scenes of animals and flowers to darker, colder landscapes, empty roads, shadowy figures, locked doors. Claire and Michael brushed it off as a phase. Children go through changes, especially as they approach their teenage years. They thought maybe the pressures of school or growing up were affecting her, and, with James being such a positive figure in their lives, it never occurred to them to look closer. But the signs were, to requiet, settle, and building. James's behavior was evolving from involvement to control. What once seemed like affection was now becoming fixation, and while no one realized it then, the foundation of their family was beginning to crack, one unnoticed moment at a time. One winter night, the family home caught fire. The blaze was fast and violent, erupting in the middle of the night while the neighborhood slept under a blanket of silence and snow. The fire started just after 2 a.m., quickly engulfing the main part of the house. Thick smoke poured out of the windows as flames climbed the walls, lighting up the sky in a terrifying orange glow. Neighbors were awakened by the sound of shattering glass and the shriek of smoke alarms. Within minutes, people rushed out in their pajamas, calling emergency services and trying to help however they could. By the time firefighters arrived, the fire had already consumed most of the structure. They fought to break through the doors and windows, navigating the collapsing rooms in intense heat. The family was believed to be asleep inside, and the situation was grim. In the chaos, James was found crawling out of the guest house, coughing and burned, but alive. Not far behind, firefighters carried Lily out unconscious but breathing. She had been found in a corner of the guest house, surrounded by smoke. James had reportedly pulled her there before help arrived. Tragically, Michael and Claire did not make it. Their bodies were discovered in the master bedroom, overcome by smoke before they could escape. The neighborhood mourned their loss. Candlelight vigils were held. A small memorial of flowers, cards, and stuffed animals formed at the edge of their lawn. News of the fire spread quickly, and James was seen as a hero. Survivors of house fires were rare, and saving a child made his story all the more powerful. He was praised for his bravery. Local media interviewed him. Churches offered support. Friends brought meals. James kept a somber tone, describing his actions as instinct, nothing more. He claimed he had woken up to the smell of smoke, realized what was happening, and rushed to save Lily. His face was wrapped in gauze, and his voice was hoarse from inhaling smoke. Everyone sympathized with his loss and admired his courage. But not everyone accepted the story without questions. A lead fire inspector began examining the scene carefully. While the front of the house appeared to be the origin point, a second source of the fire was discovered at the back of the house, specifically near the bedroom where Michael and Claire had been sleeping. It was unusual. Most house fires start from a single source: a gas leak, a short circuit, a candle left unattended. Multiple ignition points raised suspicion. Samples were collected and sent to a lab. Chemical traces were detected into locations with signs of accelerants. The pattern of the fire didn't match a typical accident. There were no faulty wires, no fallen candles, and no electrical issues. This wasn't a case of carelessness. Someone had started the fire on purpose. But no conclusions were made publicly. Investigators remained silent while gathering more information. Meanwhile, James continued to play the role of the grieving grandfather. Now the sole guardian of Lily, she was still recovering, both physically and emotionally, and was staying temporarily with extended family. Behind the praise and sympathy, a quiet investigation had begun, an investigation that would soon uncover a truth far darker than anyone imagined. As Lily recovered and began therapy, strange behaviors started to emerge. At first, she was quiet and confused, which the doctors considered a normal response to trauma. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that something deeper was troubling her. She refused to sleep alone, jumped at sudden sounds, and avoided eye contact with anyone who mentioned the fire. When her aunt asked about the night of the fire, Lily would either go silent or change the subject completely. The only name she mentioned with any consistency was Grandpa. But even then, her tone lacked the warmth it once had. During a private therapy session, Lily was asked to draw anything she remembered. The drawings she produced sent chills through the therapist. They showed dark, heavy lines forming shadowy figures watching her from corners. One drawing showed a bed surrounded by fire, with two smaller figures trapped inside, while a tall figure stood watching from the doorway. Another image revealed locked doors and surveillance-like eyes in every corner of the room. These weren't just illustrations from a child's imagination, they were glimpses into something hidden, something she didn't know how to express with words. The therapist filed a report, and authorities were contacted. The fire investigation, which had been ongoing in the background, suddenly gained momentum. Investigators returned to the scene with fresh eyes. A more thorough search of the guest house was ordered. They examined every corner, every drawer, every vent. What they found was disturbing. Hidden in the ceiling panels and inside a wooden dresser were several small recording devices. The hard drives were filled with hours of footage, all focused on one subject, Lily. The cameras had been carefully positioned to monitor her activities in the art studio, the guest house, and even parts of the main house. Some recordings were labeled by date, others by mood. The footage was quietly obsessive, showing her sleeping, drawing, reading, brushing her hair, and simply existing. None of the recordings were ever meant to be found, but now they were the center of a growing case. Investigators turned their attention to James. When they searched his room, they found more than just storage boxes. Inside a locked drawer were handwritten journals, meticulously detailed. Each page recorded Lily's daily routines, her facial expressions, her habits, and his own private thoughts. He wrote about feeling like he was the only one who truly understood her. He described her parents as barriers between them. Most chillingly, he outlined a plan labeled "Clearing the Path," a list that included ways to be alone with her without interruption. Forensics confirmed the presence of the same accelerant used in the fire on items found in James's room. Lab results from his clothes showed traces of it embedded in the fibers. The conclusion was undeniable. The fire had been planned, the victims had been targeted, and the so-called rescue had been a calculated part of the plan. James was arrested quietly, without warning. He did not resist. In custody, he refused to speak. When asked about the journals or the cameras, he stared blankly at the wall. Lily was placed under protective care. What had once been viewed as grandfatherly love was now exposed for what it really was, an obsession that crossed every line, leading to a devastating and irreversible tragedy. James was arrested and charged with arson, murder, and child endangerment. News of his arrest spread quickly, shocking the entire town. People who once admired him were left speechless. Neighbors who had shared holiday meals with the Harrisons couldn't believe that the same man they had trusted for decades was now at the center of such horrifying crimes. He had been a respected figure, a retired educator, a grandfather praised for his devotion. But behind that image was someone entirely different, someone capable of carefully planning the destruction of his own family. His trial began just 3 months later. The courtroom was packed with reporters, townspeople, and those who had known the Harrison family. Every seat was filled. The prosecution laid out the evidence in painful detail, starting with the forensic analysis of the fire, the confirmation of multiple ignition points, and the traces of accelerants found on James's belongings. The secret recordings were shown to the jury, revealing the full extent of his obsession. They watched hours of footage, some showing Lily brushing her hair or reading alone, unaware she was being filmed. The journals were also read aloud, exposing James's twisted thoughts and how he saw Lily not as a child to protect, but as someone to possess. Psychologists testified about his state of mind. They explained how his grief, loneliness, and personal delusions could have developed into fixation, but no defense could explain away the recordings, the planning, or the deliberate act of setting the fire. James sat motionless through most of the trial. Rarely speaking, he showed no emotion, not even when photos of Michael and Claire were shown, not even when Lily, now 13, walked into the courtroom and took a seat beside her aunt, holding the charred remains of her favorite stuffed bear. The jury returned a verdict in less than a day. Guilty on all counts. James was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, he blinked slowly, looking ahead without reaction. There were no outbursts, no last words, no apology. After the trial, the media focused heavily on Lily. She had become a symbol of survival, though her life had changed in ways few could understand. She moved in with her mother's sister, who lived in another state. Her name was removed from public records, and all media requests were denied. She no longer attended public school. Therapy became a regular part of her life, helping her piece together memories and separate truth from trauma. She rarely spoke about her grandfather. When asked by a therapist what she remembered most about that night, she simply said, "The silence." The family home in Maple Ridge was demolished. Nothing was salvaged. The backyard studio was dismantled, and the guest house was torn down. The lot remained empty, fenced off with a simple sign that read "Private Property." Neighbors avoided walking past it. The Harrisons' story became a haunting reminder that danger doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, behind gentle smiles and quiet words, within the walls of what looks like a perfect home.